Hi, I'm Robert Meehan. At Health Republic Insurance of New Jersey, we believe everyone needs to be informed about the importance of healthcare coverage and the opportunities that are available. That's why we're proud to support programming produced by the Caucus Educational Corporation and their partners in public television.
Funding for this edition of One-on-One with Steve Adubato has been provided by the Robert Wood Johnson Foundation, Health Republic Insurance of New Jersey, the Healthcare Foundation of New Jersey, founded by the Jewish community, Cohn Resnick, Accounting, Tax, and Advisory, where forward thinking creates results, the Fidelco Group, the Russell Berry Foundation, and by ADP, a comprehensive provider of human resources technology and services. Promotional support provided by The Record, North Jersey's trusted source, and NorthJersey.com. And by Meadowlands Regional Chamber, building essential connections that drive business growth.
This is One-on-One. I'm an equal American just like you are.
The jobs of tomorrow are not the jobs of yesterday.
Look at this. You got this?
Here it is, man. Look at that.
Life without dance is boring.
When you first heard that they were doing Charlie Rose and Gayle King, didn't you go, what?
Do you enjoy talking politics?
No. People call me because they feel nobody's paying attention.
Our culture, I don't think, has ever been tested the way it's being tested right now.
Such a good question. High five.
Welcome to One-on-One. I'm Steve Adubato. It is my honor to introduce a gentleman you're about to see on camera. He is Bob Carr, the author of a fascinating book called Through the Fires, also the founder of an organization called the Give Something Back Foundation, and the CEO and founder of Heartland Payment Systems. And by the way, you told us in another interview, that company went public, sold for?
$4.3 billion.
Yeah. And by the way, check our website out if you want to find out more about the foundation, the Give Something Back Foundation. It's worth checking out that interview. But I want to talk about the book. This book, as a student of leadership, someone who writes, teaches, and thinks about leadership a lot, there's a lot of leadership lessons in here as well, in this. But what struck me about your book more than anything else is that you're not just some guy who made a ton of money and kept making a ton of money and kept succeeding over and over again. You succeeded and then lost a lot of money and then kept coming back and back and back. Where does your tenacity come from?
It comes from not knowing something better to do than to try to prove what you're doing. There are serial entrepreneurs. I'm just the opposite. I started a business when I was 25 years old, and I hung in there through thick and thin a few times and was able to make something pretty meaningful out of it over a lot of time. So I just believe in making the best of what you can do, and I felt my talents were in this one area, and I always felt I could keep growing, and there could be more and more done to make things better and better.
Sorry for interrupting, but describe that area.
I think, my ability, I think, number one, is to be able to motivate people to be on a team that's doing great work, doing good things, helping businesses and helping each other as fellow workers.
But you built such a successful company, right? Explain to folks, someone says, oh, well, you, quote, lost it, or you took this big hit. Explain to folks the coming back part, because that's the part I'm fascinated by. Because there are a whole range of people who do not come back.
Right.
Who basically say, well, that's it. That was some greater force. That's my fate. That's the way it's supposed to be. And that's not how you saw it.
Well, I didn't see it. Where we took our huge hit was when the economic downturn came in 2008.
Right.
It turned out, and it was just serendipity, unfortunate for us, that we were breached. And
it was a data breach.
It was a data breach. It was the largest data breach ever at the time. And we were the front page news all over the country for several days. And our existence was in peril because we didn't know what was going to happen because we processed for these very big financial companies, Visa, MasterCard, American Express, Discover. We were sponsored by banks, and we didn't know what they were going to do. And there were 300 companies breached, like we were, by the same attack vectors, the same criminals, but we were the biggest, and so we got all the press. And we were able to do a couple of things strategically that were the right things to do, and we were able to get through it, and we paid $150 million. I lost personally all my wealth at the time.
You lost all your wealth?
I lost $300 million one day.
I'm sorry, in one day?
Yes. It was the day that the market crashed and our stock went down to below a point where I had a very small margin loan, I thought. But by the time the market went down so far, and that together with the breach, it brought the stock under a place where I had to basically give it away to pay off a margin loan.
Do you ever ask yourself the biggest lesson you learned in all that about, I'm going to use the word, my favorite word, leadership?
The lesson, without a question, is do the right thing. And it's easy to say, but it's very meaningful. We were at a point where I think a lot of other companies were in a crisis, and all the advice from the experts was, don't talk about this. Just let us take care of it. Refer it to the lawyers. And I absolutely refused to do that because the culture of our company was, and especially with our employees and customers, is to be forthright, to be transparent.
And by
That's
the way,
who we were.
Sorry for interrupting again. Explain so folks understand that the company's basic service was?
We're a processor of electronic payments, credit card payments, at gas pumps and at merchant locations and so on.
So the kind of data breach you're talking about, devastating.
It's very devastating, huge. Millions of card numbers were stolen.
So quote, lawyer up. Get the lawyers to handle it. You say nothing as the leader, as the CEO.
That was the advice. That's not what we did.
Did you tell your lawyers, did you tell those other folks, no, I'm handling this?
I did. They weren't
Did they
very
say
happy.
you're crazy?
They told me not only was I crazy, but they warned me that I could be causing my fellow workers to go to jail if I said the wrong thing. The intimidation factor was the most incredible intimidating factor I've seen. It was amazing.
Where did your strength come from, and who was it that was closest to you saying, Bob, you're doing the right thing, stay the course?
My conscience was what stayed the course. I've been through as I talk about in the very early part of the book, I learned what it was like to be involved with intimidating individuals early on in my life. And I learned that at some point you've just got to stand up to it and do what you think is right. And we did that. We had an all-hands meeting. We admitted that we were breached. We went out to our customers. We told them that we were. Yeah. And then we proceeded to bring encryption to America. And we proceeded to form an organization that is a cooperative effort of the different processors to share information about what was the bad guys were trying to do to all of us.
Yeah, by the way, in this book, Bob also talks about some really personal things. You talk about your dad?
My dad, yeah.
Abusive?
Yes, alcoholic, abusive. Very, not an uncommon thing at all.
Make you tougher? Were you tougher because of that?
I was tougher in the situations, in some situations. I've never really been in a lot of fist fights and that type of thing. But when right is right and wrong is wrong, you've got to take a position and fight for what you believe in. I learned that a long time ago, and it's the reason we're sitting here talking, frankly.
Your mother was a night shift waitress.
That's right.
She teach you working real hard?
My dad worked hard and my mom worked hard. Working hard is not an uncommon thing in this world. Yeah. It's a very common thing. My mom said, work hard, keep your nose to the grindstone, and everything is going to work out. And I said, Mom, that's not really the way it works. But she and I had that disagreement.
But real quick, the ethical piece. You talk extensively about business ethics in here. Right. I mean, by the way, the name of the book is Through the Fires with Robert Owen Carr, with Dirk Johnson.
Yes.
I want to make that clear as well. You're very critical of financial institutions, unethical business practices. Why?
Because they take advantage of the poorest victims out there. The vulnerable people are taken advantage of by very smart people who go to the best schools in the world.
For example?
For example, the fact that there are software algorithms written by ingenious people to maximize the NSF fees for bad checks. And who do those go against? Those go against the very poorest people in the country who can least afford them.
What has happened? Well, you've been saying these things for a while.
For a long time.
What kind of reaction have you gotten from the leaders in the financial community?
A lot of one-on-one, that's great, Bob, you're right, keep going. But when it comes to a public endorsement that there needs to be, that these practices need to come to an end, very little support, unfortunately.
In the other segment we had you here, we were talking a lot about your organization, the Give Something Back Foundation. Do you believe that there's enough giving back on the part of those who have the most?
I'm very impressed with a number of very wealthy people and what they do. There's really some amazing work being done out there. And frankly, Steve, I think a lot of the problem is that people want to do good, but they don't know how to do it. And they're looking for ways to really do something meaningful, rather than just writing a check in December, to 25 different organizations that they can't really track what happened to that money. The thing about our foundation is we put specific kids through college, and you can see these kids change and grow. It's just it's the most.
You track them.
Yes,
you
absolutely,
engage them.
absolutely.
Yeah. Last question. You have another book planned.
Well, we have the second edition of this book coming out. We ran out of copies of this printing, and we're doing a second edition, which is being distributed by my alma mater. I'm very proud to say the University of Illinois Press. And then another book will be coming out later this year called Working Class to College, where we really talk about the program.
Working Class to College?
Yes.
It's about the program.
It's about our foundation program, which is working very well, and we want to try to expand it over the years.
Do you get more satisfaction out of helping the kids that you've helped go to college succeed in their lives than you have being incredibly, amazingly successful as a businessman?
The two things that have given me the most pleasure in life is, one, having 4,600 employees, 87% of whom think the company is a great place to work. My parents didn't like their jobs. I grew up in a world where people didn't like their jobs. They came home at 5 o'clock, and the other thing is putting these kids through college. It's just so gratifying to see that happen. And I write about that in the book and talk about the happiest moment in my life wasn't ringing the bell to open the New York Stock Exchange.
That wasn't.
It was getting that survey back that said 87% of my people thought we were a great place to work.
You got to do this for me, because we don't have all those thousands of people. We have a bunch of people here in a crew, a great crew here, a great team behind the scenes in the control room, and lots of folks that are part of our team. And I'm sure they're not always happy with me. Stop snickering in my earpiece right now as I say that. The key to getting people to really like their work and where they work is?
They have to feel like they're doing something worthwhile when they come to work every day, that they're making the world a better place.
What about how you treat them?
It's imperative that we treat our people with respect, and we really try to do that. We're not always successful. There's 13% that don't think we're a great place to work, so we can't forget them.
The name of the book is Through the Fires, an American business story of turbulence, triumph, and giving back. Bob, I want to thank you for joining us. We appreciate it. And so many young people who are benefiting from this foundation, I can't even comprehend not just what they're going to achieve, but way more importantly, how much more they're going to give back to so many others.
They absolutely are. I'm really proud of our kids. They're terrific. The millennials are okay. They're good people. So thank you very much.
No, that's encouraging. Thank you. Stay right there.
Thank you.
We'll be right back right after this.
Visit us online at steveautobato.org. Email us at info@caucusnj.org. Find us on Facebook at facebook.com/SteveAutobato PhD. And follow us on Twitter at Steve Autobato.
We are joined by Dale Russakoff, who is the author of a compelling book. It is called The Prize: Who is in Charge of America's Schools? And we are here at the New Jersey Performing Arts Center. Thank you for joining us.
Well, thanks for having me.
What a compelling title for this book, The Prize. What does the prize mean?
Well, the prize, it means that it actually refers to the Newark Public Schools budget. It doesn't refer to the $100 million from Mark Zuckerberg. It refers to the $1 billion that Newark spends every year on its public schools. And it's always been a contentious prize for the politicians and the bosses and the unions, and everybody wants to have a piece of it.
Well, why don't we put things in perspective? In 2010, there was a very big announcement on Oprah.
Yes.
And you watched Oprah for the first time. You just told me that.
Yeah.
You watched it, and Mark Zuckerberg, together with Cory Booker, Oprah, and Chris Christie, Governor Christie, announced this $100 million pledge, contribution to the Newark Public Schools, which would be matched with another $100 million of private money. That's $200 million to the Newark Public Schools that would transform education forever in the Newark Public Schools.
Right.
You spend the next 4.5 years looking at this transformation, and you come up with?
Well, it wasn't transformed. I actually thought that it would be substantially transformed, maybe not miraculously, which was the way they were describing it. But what happened was they did expand the charter schools. They doubled the number of students in charter schools in Newark. And in Newark, as you know, charter schools outperform district schools. The students do much better in charter schools. So that is a very positive change. But the district schools, where 60% of the students go, were not transformed. And in many ways, the children are doing worse on the state test scores in kindergarten through 8th grade. So there's been a lot of stress and upheaval in the district schools in the transformation, and that wasn't really, I don't think they foresaw what was going to happen to the district schools.
We sat down and we spoke to Chris Cerf, who was the education commissioner in the state of New Jersey, and then actually came into Newark. As we do this program, he is actually running the Newark Public Schools. He is the state-appointed head superintendent of the Newark Public Schools after Cammie Anderson left as superintendent of the Newark Public Schools. We actually talked to Chris Cerf, and he said that by any reasonable standard, that any reasonable person would say, there's been significant improvement in the Newark Public Schools, and not simply in the charter schools. In full disclosure, I don't hold any position at the Robert Treat Academy, but my father, Steve Adebato Sr., started the Robert Treat Academy and has been very involved in the charter school movement. He's not actively involved at this point, but my family's still involved. And you write about him and his efforts and involved in, he's mentioned in the book, I'll just say that. But the point here is about Chris Cerf. He says, you got to be kidding me. Public schools are much better, you say?
Well, I think that the changes that were made in the management of the schools were real improvements. But if you look at the student test scores in K through 8, they're lower than they were 5 years ago. And I don't understand, why, but that is a fact. And, people who are so focused on accountability, they've always talked about test scores, and that's the facts, is that the kids in
test scores, excuse me for interrupting, Dale. Test scores were the primary methodology that you used to measure this?
No, that was the methodology they used to look at student success, was test scores. And so I'm saying that the district schools did not improve. And if you go into the district schools, you see the stress that they're under, because there have been, so many consolidations and thousands of kids have moved around, and there have been cuts in support services. There are fewer social workers and counselors, and the kids' problems are still as great as they were in the past. So I saw district schools that actually, with some of the reforms that Cammie Anderson put in, were starting to really improve. They were getting traction. There was a better school culture, more buy-in among teachers and parents. Well, they were overwhelmed by the needs of the kids and the lack of the support services to deal with them.
Yeah, but the $100/200 million that was in place, that had to help.
The $100 to $200 million was for the systems change at the top of the school district. It wasn't for the classroom. In fact, there was an email that went through Cory Booker's office when they were negotiating.
Mayor Cory Booker at the time.
When he was
now
the mayor.
U.S. Senator Cory Booker.
Exactly.
Ras Baraka is not a major figure here. I just want to be clear, correct?
Well, he was a major figure in the book, but he...
Because he was the principal at Central
and,
High School and a member of the city
mayor.
council.
Yes, and because he was elected mayor,
Right.
as this uprising against the reform plan went through. But
No, what you were saying was about how the dollars were being spent and what it was not going to be spent on.
Yeah, and the email that was that went between Cory Booker's office and Mark Zuckerberg's office said MZ's money is not going to the classroom. It was going to go to expand charter schools and to do systems changes at the management level, changing the teacher's contract and so forth, but not into the classroom, because they felt that to reform the system, you would spend money trying to reform these systems, and those systems changes would then be in place. But if you put money into the classroom, when the funds ran out, there would no longer be any money there, and it wouldn't be lasting change.
Does that make sense from your perspective?
Well, I can see why you wouldn't want to put philanthropic money into the classroom, because it's time limited, and so you're going to be putting money in, and then it's not going to be there, and the change. But I would have thought that they would have spent more time trying to figure out how to get money out of the central office of the Newark School District into the school buildings and into the classrooms. It's something Chris Cerf has said he agrees is a priority.
How would you describe then Mayor Cory Booker's role in all this? Did he do well? Because he was a key player. As I read the book, it was clear that Mark Zuckerberg at Facebook really became enamored with Cory Booker, and that was a big part of why he did this.
Right.
Rate Cory Booker in this.
Well, I think that Zuckerberg thought that Cory Booker was kind of an urban Superman. I think he'd been really wowed by the Brick City show, which showed Booker fighting crime.
The reality show.
Yes, and Booker making great strides against crime in Newark, but he wasn't up on the latest news in Newark, which at the time showed that crime had gone back up significantly. So I think he really thought that Cory Booker, when he said we're going to transform the Newark schools, could almost wave a wand and make it happen. And that wasn't something that Cory Booker was capable of doing.
Ms. McClain actually, as I remember that interview, said that students and their families have benefited from, quote, every dollar of that Facebook money, you say?
Students have benefited from every dollar?
That's right. And their families. Virtually every dollar.
I guess I haven't seen those results.
That's not what your research showed?
No. I think a lot of the money went into things that didn't reach the classroom and didn't reach the students' lives. Well, there was $21 million spent on consulting firms who were responsible for building these new systems and the systems changes, the new teachers' evaluation system, the new contract, the new data system, the new enrollment system, all of these things that, for which they spent a lot of money on consultants that perhaps could have been spent elsewhere. Now, some of the consultants did excellent work. It wasn't like it was just all, thrown away into a pot or something.
Were any new schools built?
There were new charter schools that were opened, and there were new schools. There was a Bard Early College High School.
That matters?
Of course it matters. But when you said every dollar spent reached the children and helped the children, I don't think that the facts can hold up to that.
Talk about the charter school thing. Do you believe that, well, some charter schools have done well and some have not? Clearly, some have not.
Right.
Do you believe that, and Ras Baraka sat here, and he also, in our interview at the NJIT, New Jersey Institute of Technology, said, look, ultimately the success of the children of the Newark Public Schools has to be with the regular public schools, because you can never put enough kids in our charter schools. Is that true?
Well, I don't know that it is true anymore, because it looks as if the KIPP New Jersey schools expand as they plan to, they'll have 50% of the students.
Is that a problem from your perspective?
No.
It's not?
I don't think
that many kids would be in non-traditional public schools?
Not if they're being served well. I think the issue is, like, if you have 50%, that's a lot of kids who are still in the district schools. And as you move kids into charter schools, there's a responsibility to sort of address the whole ecosystem, and not just think that, well, because we've got 50% of kids in charter schools, we've done a great thing. Because the problem is that nobody's ever seemed to figure out, how do you grow the charter sector and still make sure that the children in the district schools are thriving? And that hasn't been happening in this district, and nobody's figured that out anywhere in the country.
Your background as a journalist, Washington Post?
Yes.
How many years?
28.
What kind of reaction have you gotten to this book?
I've gotten, I've been amazed at the reaction. It's been, there's a lot, it seems to be
A lot of
continuing
buzz.
interest, a lot of buzz. And I've been also really encouraged that, people on all sides of the education debate think there's something valuable to read in it.
4.5 years. Everyone takes, excuse me, whatever they choose to take out of a book, and I find it, I will tell you, compelling. This is the book. It's called The Prize, Who's in Charge of America's Schools? And while this is about Newark, it could be Chicago, Philadelphia, Detroit, Atlantic City, Trenton, anywhere, any urban school system, they all face extraordinary challenges. What's the biggest message you would want to, not Facebook didn't choose to do that in every public school, urban school system in the country. What's the biggest message you would want to take away, people to take away from this book?
I would want people to realize that the real, when they talk about transforming education, it's not something that you can do from the top, and it's not something that outsiders can do to a city. It has to really come from the bottom up, because education, the real magic of education happens in classrooms between teachers and students every day. Every school is different. Every school needs a different approach. And it has to be something that, where the resources get to the school building and principals and teachers are able to use them for the benefits of the kids that are in front of them.
One more thing, and I'm not providing commentary because in public broadcasting it's not the role of a host or anchor to do that, but I remember watching the Oprah segment with Governor Christie, but frankly more importantly Cory Booker, when you said Mark Zuckerberg saw him as some sort of urban Superman. There is no such thing as an urban Superman in elected office. There is no one person, man or woman, who can do that alone, and to expect Cory Booker to do that just seemed incredibly unrealistic.
Yes.
Not to mention, well, someone would use some other words for that, and it has nothing to do with Cory Booker. No one person could do that.
Right. No, I remember that Clement Price said
The
that
late great.
the late great Clement Price,
Who's featured in this book extensively. Go ahead.
yes.
I'm sorry.
But I remember when Oprah Winfrey introduced Cory Booker that day as the rock star mayor of of Newark, New Jersey. Clement Price said, "There's no such thing as a rock star mayor. You can be a rock star, you can be a mayor, you can't be both." And I think that was a misconception from the beginning.
One of the many things that the late, extraordinary Clement Price said that made a lot of sense. It's just a lot of people just trying to work every day to make this city that some call Brick City better every day. Dale Russakoff, the book is called The Prize, and I encourage everyone to read it and learn from it. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
One-on-One with Steve Adubato has been a production of the Caucus Educational Corporation, celebrating over 25 years of broadcast excellence. Funding for this edition of One-on-One with Steve Adubato has been provided by the Robert Wood Johnson Foundation, Health Republic Insurance of New Jersey, the Healthcare Foundation of New Jersey, Cohn Resnick, the Fidelco Group, the Russell Berry Foundation, and by ADP, transportation provided by Airbrook Limousine, serving the metropolitan New York, New Jersey area.